Um, I think just for sake of time, I'm going to start very slowly so people can slowly percolate in. I am Merav Ofer, the director and PI of SHIELD. This is a SHIELD webinar, and Justina Sokol is our project manager. And just quickly, because I don't want to take time from our main speaker, SHIELD is about the heliosphere, is a bubble around our sun. All stars have those bubbles. Here are some images, beautiful images of other bubbles. We call them astrospheres. And SHIELD, we created this cute movie. If you're not familiar with that, you can check our website. But it shows that our bubble, the heliosphere, now engulf all the planets and protected us. We don't think this was a case all the time in the lifetime of the sun. So part of SHIELD is trying to investigate the effect of that on evolution of life on Earth. Um, oops. We are a huge team with lots of institutions housed in BU, but you can see all the other institutions and people that collaborate. And our mission is to really try to make a big leap on understanding all the physical processes that govern this big heliosphere. And here I'm not going to go through all that, but it's a large NASA center with lots of people, not only in theory and modeling, but all the big missions that relate with that, including New Horizons, that is close to the heart of Alan Stern here, um, and future missions that are already on board, like IMAP. Um, we also care very much about bringing new talent and not just bringing, but fostering and help mentoring them. So we have lots of programs. Check us out. Sign up for our summer school. It's all in our website. So I'm going to go really fast. And now I have the pleasure to present Alan Stern. So SHIELD webinar is all about um, hearing the trajectory of important people and figuring out like the big role models and figuring out what was the big successes and also what was the challenges that they faced along the way. And this is a very informal webinar, so we will have lots of time for questions. I don't think Alan needs introduction, but I'm just going to say really quickly, he's a PI of New Horizons that went to Pluto and now is exploring the Kuiper Belt. He's also was an astronaut. I also know he went to the deep ocean, so he went to explore physically some of the boundaries. He's now at the executive in Southwest Research Institute. And in 2007 to 2009, he was also directing the whole NASA science program. So lots to talk. Alan, I'm going to stop sharing and the floor is yours.
Hi, Marav. How's the sound volume?
Fabulous.
Okay, well, thank you for that generous introduction and thank you for inviting me here. Hi, everybody. This is probably the weirdest seminar I've ever given because it's not about a research topic or a mission or project topic. It's a little uncomfortable just talking about yourself. But Marav Center SHIELD is really amazing. The work that's done there is the very best in the world in studying the outer heliosphere and astrospheres. And I wanted to support it, so I said yes to Marav's unusual request. And what I'm going
Thank
to
you for
do,
doing it.
it's my pleasure, and thank you to all the
Alan,
people who are here.
can you up the volume just a bit?
Sure, I can try.
Okay.
Let's see if does that help? Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to show some slides. I apologize. Many of them have a lot of words on them, but I'm not going to read all the words. I'm just going to talk about it. Some of them have some fun pictures and images. And then towards the end, and there's only 16 or 17 slides, I was asked by Marav to answer some very specific questions. So you'll see the questions and the answers. And then we'll open it up for Q&A if people have an interest in that. I think I'm going to talk for 25 minutes, and I'm going to get started by sharing, and I'm going to share a slide that is about how I got started in science. So let me do that right away. Can we see that?
Yes.
Okay, so that's me. As a little kid, I think I was age 5 with my first scientific instrument, which was a holiday present. And I think it's the only scientific instrument that I ever asked for that's looking down instead of up. But I really had a strong interest in science uh, ever since I can remember. And I've been very fortunate that it led to many wonderful things that I've been able to work on. And I'll tell you a little about that. Unfortunately, we're going to start with the word slides, no more picture slides for a few. A little background. And if these slides are cut off at the top, I apologize. They looked fine on my screen this morning, but I grew up in the cities of New Orleans and Dallas. Um, uh, Pretty much as all kids do, following their parents. And then I live near Boulder, Colorado now. I have 3 grown kids. I have 2 really fun, fast cars. One's an EV, one's not. And all my life, I've had one big dream, and that is to participate in space exploration. There's science and other kinds of exploration. And so I feel like a person who's really been blessed that they got to grow up and live their life's dream, and look forward to a lot more of that over the coming years. As I said, I was raised in New Orleans and Dallas and always have been interested in space. If you're curious about my education, I went to the University of Texas in Austin and the University of Colorado here in Boulder, and my degrees are listed there, both science and engineering. I give the vast majority of the credit for things that I have done to being at the Southwest Research Institute, which is based in San Antonio, and many of you know it. SwRI, or SwRI as we sometimes call it, is a partner in SHIELD, although I'm not a co-investigator in SHIELD. I know quite a number of people at Southwest who are. But Southwest is a very interesting organization. It's been around since the late 1940s. As I said, it's based in San Antonio, Texas. It is a not-for-profit company that does many things, from oil and gas research to automated advanced vehicles to training and to space work. There are about 550 people at Southwest Research in the 3 different divisions that comprise what's called space sector. That includes about 200 PhDs and a lot of engineers and technicians and support people. And I came to Southwest in 1991, and it's just a tremendous environment for doing research. And as I said, I have I have no end to what I could say good things about the Institute and what it did in helping me build my own career. And I know that that's true for many other people too. I have, over the years, worked with, mentored, and learned from 23 postdocs that I have hired. And I won't go through a list of names because I'm afraid to leave people out, and I'm not going to name all 23. I've also written a lot of research papers, several hundred now, which is hard to believe, about half of which are first author papers. And I've also authored 3 books, all non-technical, but about space or space exploration in some respect. And I've edited some technical volumes, and I love public speaking. Those are all important things to me. I came with the assignment of originating and building Southwest's Planetary program. I was not the first planetary scientist to come, but I was specifically given the assignment in 1991 of starting to recruit more and more planetary scientists. And we built that program from the ground up, and a lot of people get credit. It's not all mine. But I did start the UV spectrograph program that has now flown a whole series of instruments across the solar system on missions like Rosetta and New Horizons, and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, and JUICE and Europa Clipper, and Juno. And I founded our division that's in Boulder. We started that in 1994 with me and a postdoc and a part-time secretary. And I grew it to about 60 people before going to NASA headquarters in 2007 to be the NASA Associate Administrator to head the Science Mission Directorate, which I did in 2007 and 8. And then I came back to Southwest Research and have not been leading the office that I started since then, but have been enjoying watching it grow. I have now participated in 31 mission teams. I don't count proposals, just missions that have been built and flown. And I've been fortunate to be PI now 15 times. Now that sounds like an enormous number. Even every time I count, um, half those almost are sounding rocket missions. But I was still principal investigator. Some were experiments on the space shuttle. Other were principal investigator of instruments on various planetary missions. I'm not counting being principal investigator on observing proposals on Hubble or other telescopes. And of course, the New Horizons mission that Marav referred to. Just for a little bit of color, because I've done some different things. I spent 4 years, and Southwest Research was very supportive in this, doing high altitude airborne astronomy and high performance aircraft. And I'll show you some pictures from that. Most of that was at Johnson Space Center and out in California at Edwards Air Force Base, where the NASA Armstrong Research Center, then called Dryden, is located. Since 2009, tried to contribute to the development of commercial spaceflight because I think it's so important to the future of space science and to many other aspects of spaceflight. And I've been on the board of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation since that time, 2009, twice elected to be the board chairman. I own a small consulting practice, and over the past 15 years, had about 20 clients. Some are very conventional universities or large legacy aerospace companies, but some are about half are new space companies. And that has been very rewarding because I've been able to not only feel like I'm helping in doing that, but also to learn about other business cultures and learn about how others solve problems and what their problems are, because I think that is broadening. I am a former board member on Paragon Corporation out of Tucson and Kinetics Corporation that's based also in Arizona. They're both aerospace firms. And I am currently a board member at Voyager Space Technologies. I've been doing that for 6 years. The company went public last year on the New York Stock Exchange, and that's been a really broadening experience, to say the least. I'm also co-founder of a company called Worldview, and I was originally on their board until I got too busy with New Horizons. I served as chief scientist for the company for a period years ago, and have enjoyed that. And that's an ongoing and growing firm in Tucson as well. It does high altitude ballooning and a lot of work for NASA in addition to other customers. When I said I did high performance jets for astronomy, this is the primary aircraft that I flew in, this type. It's called an F-18 Hornet. NASA has 5 of them. This model, this particular tail number 852 is one that I flew in many times during the late 1990s and very early 2000s. And we used this aircraft where I flew as a backseater, flying with astronomy gear, to do things that cannot be done by ground-based astronomy, and which we were able to show we could do at much lower cost than flying big airplanes like Sophia or the Kuiper Airborne Observatory, and go to places that they really couldn't go in terms of both altitude and also over the oceans. That took a bit of training, and that was a lot of fun. This is almost all the missions took place at night. Of course, only a few were training missions in the daytime to get certified. And I flew with handheld instruments for the most part. Like you see in the upper left, that's actually in a different type of aircraft called the WB-57 Canberra that flew out of Johnson Space Center. But the main picture here is in the cockpit of an F-18 Hornet on a night mission to do asteroid occultations, where we could fly and get occultations over the clouds when they were being clouded out by ground-based observers. Probably the best well-known mission that I've been a part of is New Horizons, NASA's first mission in the New Frontiers series. And New Horizons had this very audacious goal sent by a decadal survey, the very first planetary decadal survey, to explore the Kuiper Belt, dwarf planets in it, particularly the Pluto system, and is still continuing to this day. Very healthy spacecraft. Very productive science team. We're currently on an extended mission that's going to extend through the end of FY29. So still another 3.5 years on that extended mission. As it shows there, we launched it back in 2006, intercepted the Pluto system in 2015 at the very inner edge of the Kuiper Belt, and have presently studied now approaching 40 different objects in the Kuiper Belt, of which Pluto and Charon are two. One other, Arrokoth, we made a very close flyby. That's a small primordial planetesimal Kuiper Belt object. But we've also used the spacecraft as an astronomical observatory to study other Kuiper Belt objects in the distance and to do some astrophysics and a bunch of heliophysics as well. And these projects are very large, and I think probably everyone here knows that New Horizons has involved over 2,500 men and women, most notably at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab and at Southwest Research Institute, but at many universities and small companies, and of course at Lockheed and Boeing that built our launch vehicle, and at NASA. And these are big teams. And all I can say is that I'm very well known for this mission. Sometimes I feel a little bit like a character on that old show, Gilligan's Island, that got typecast for doing one thing when you've done many other things in your career. But I'm so proud of this mission and this mission team. And I often think I get way too much credit as the principal investigator for a mission that would never have happened without night and day work for years to get it designed and built and launched on time by all those other thousands of people. This is a picture of myself at the launch pad for New Horizons. That's a big Atlas V, 180 feet tall behind me, just a few days before we launched. And that picture on the right is the spacecraft up above me inside the launch fairing, the nose cone, if you will, of the Atlas. And that's the Pluto-Charon binary that we went to explore, and which so much great science has turned out and is still turning out from that. We can talk about that if there's an interest in that science. I've got to do a lot of really other interesting things along the way. Again, thanks to Southwest Research, I was a part of a polar expedition to South Pole, conducted under the flag of the National Science Foundation. This is when I went down there. This was the Scott Amundsen base, which has since been replaced by a much more modern facility. I went down there with another colleague and one of my postdocs back then, Dave Slater of the Southwest Research Institute. And there's a little picture on the upper left that you can see of the two of us in front of the South Pole marker. We went down there to calibrate a telescope called Spirex, an infrared telescope. We were selected after some competition by the NSF and went down there from, I think we left the day after Thanksgiving that year and got back just right before Christmas. I've also been fortunate to take place, Marav mentioned this, in some deep sea exploration. This is a mission that I was a part of in 2022. You can see two of my colleagues there, in which we dove to the Titanic, and I was the mission scientist, 13,800 feet beneath the North Atlantic. This is a video that I made from the porthole, and I think we can play it. Right off the bow of the Titanic, bottom of the North Atlantic, on July 22nd of that year. And I could talk about that all day long, but I won't. So then I'll just move on. Marav mentioned the fact that I flew in space as a scientist, not as a space tourist, in 2023 on this vehicle, Virgin Galactic Spaceship 2, Unity, on a suborbital flight. And I have to say, because I got my start flying suborbital sounding rockets, which also launched from southern New Mexico, just as this did, that in many ways I found it a really interesting kind of homecoming, to be able to finally actually, as a scientist, to be able to go to space and to do it from the same location that my very first space missions had taken place at White Sands. And to do it as a scientist and not as a tourist was important to me. That involved a whole bunch of training, which was a lot of fun, even more fun and more training, of course, than we did for all that airborne astronomy. And it started years before we actually flew the flight. Southwest was backing this program as far back as 2009, and backed it all the way through the present. We have been selected now to fly again through a competitive proposal with NASA to fly an astronomy experiment that should fly sometime in the next year or so, dependent upon Virgin Galactic schedules. And that's also a part of a Southwest research program. As I said, it's co-funded with NASA. And this is just a picture from Apogee to give you a sense of what it's like to fly at an altitude like this over the Earth. I didn't get a lot of time to look out the window, so please don't ask me about whether I had a transformative life experience. It was transformative in getting to accomplish a life goal. But unlike a lot of people who've flown as tourists, I didn't get to just put my nose on the window and marvel at the Earth very much. I had a pretty compact and busy checklist of things to get done. There were 9 separate objectives on that flight, and we got them all done. So Marav asked these different questions, and I provided written answers like a homework assignment. She asked who was important to me in school and motivating me in my early career. I have to say, astronauts as a little kid growing up, I really wanted to explore space myself. I was also very romantically captivated by scientists throughout my life, as well as my father and my mom. I should have said that. They were really influential, I think, to all the kids in my family, myself, of course, included. And I had many teachers particularly through high school and at university, who I have to say played important roles. Rav asked what influenced me when I was growing up. And I have to say, more than anything, it was the birth of spaceflight. I was a little bitty kid when the first human space flights and robotic space flights were taking place. And it just swept me off my feet. And I couldn't imagine anything more futuristic to get involved in, with great promise for not just science, but for the advance of civilization. And there's no second to it in my life professionally. What's my first memory of science? It's an experiment I did with my parents' TV when I was 4 years old. It didn't blow anything up, but it was a real scientific experiment, which today I can look back and say it had an honest to God hypothesis, and it was testable and repeatable. And unfortunately, the way it turned out, I got the data, but it was not the outcome that I wanted. And as a 4-year-old, it made me pretty sad. But someday I can talk about that maybe over a beer with some of you. What obstacles did I face? Well, I have to be honest and say that I was pretty lazy for a long time as I was growing up. I didn't apply myself very much. I didn't have much self-confidence. I was also very affected by the space shuttle explosion of Challenger 40 years ago last month. I was involved in that mission as project scientist on a satellite, which was blown to smithereens in front of my eyes, and I knew 6 of the 7 people aboard, and it was a really transformative experience. It took me a long time to work through. And I think another obstacle that I faced, and I want to point out for some of you, if you are like me, a person who tends to be an early adopter of ideas, that's often an obstacle because early adopters are in the minority, and oftentimes coming forward with a fresh idea, like we should send a mission to Pluto, or the Southwest Research Institute should open a branch in Boulder, Colorado, can raise skepticism and barriers to entry. And so an honest assessment, I think, is that being an early adopter has been an obstacle. But I've been able to overcome those things a number of different ways, as you've seen here. And I count persistence as high on that list, but you see some of the others as well. Asking what particularly shaped my career. After the Challenger space shuttle exploded, I decided to change my career path. I had been an aerospace engineer, although I had a physics undergraduate degree and an astronomy undergraduate degree. I was working as an aerospace engineer, but the whole time I was working as an engineer, I found myself more and more attracted to go back to science. By that point, um, I had a wife and a child and a house with a mortgage. And it seemed really hard to imagine how to ever go back to graduate school, how to stop and get off the merry-go-round for a few years. Uh, but uh, because the space shuttle was lost and most everything in civil spaceflight, everything at NASA had to come to a halt for a few years, there was nothing to launch any of these new missions. I was able to take the opportunity to go back to grad school and become a scientist. And that was very important in shaping my career. Choosing Southwest Research as my first job out of grad school, and who I still work for today, was equally pivotal. Um, and not letting go of quests, but like seeing Pluto explored and my interest in flying in space also have to rank up there. Um, Marav asked which aspects that differentiated you made you approach science uniquely. Um, I would say being an engineer prior to being a scientist has really helped, particularly in developing instrumentation for spaceflight, like those UV spectrometers and some other ultraviolet instruments. Um, uh, there are a lot of different ways to be a principal investigator, and my pathway is only one. But in my case, I really enjoyed being in the engineering meetings, having been a former engineer. And I think much more so than some of my colleagues who were principal investigators. And so I didn't view the engineering side as any kind of a chore. Um, the engineering background really helped me and helped me contribute to some of the problem solving that we did. I also have developed a knack for writing successful proposals. It's one of the banes, I think, of all scientific careers, no matter what field you're in. The proposal writing is very important. And if you're not successful with that, it's very hard to be successful. And I was terrible at it to begin with, and almost left the field over it. I was so bad, but then decided to give it everything I've got for a year, and I managed to win a bunch of proposals. And then ever since then, have had a decent batting average. And so I think that knack for writing proposals, even though I hate writing proposals, um, has differentiated me. Um, Intense passion for exploration is another aspect, because I've been equally interested in exploration alongside science. And I have a lot of different scientific interests, and so I've published um, research um, and everything from the Earth's upper atmosphere to astrophysics and many kinds of objects around the solar system in many different wave bands, and used many different ground-based and space-based facilities, radio telescopes and airborne astronomy and optical telescopes, in missions to the inner solar system, middle solar system, outer solar system, small bodies, giant planets, dwarf planets, um, and just lots and lots of different interests. Um, and I've often found that thinking out of the box is a good tool to overcome obstacles and problems along the way. And so I've tried to read about how others have done that, and to apply the tricks I've learned from others, and just apply a way of thinking that looks for out of the box solutions when you can't go straight up the middle sometimes. I think I'll stop there. That's just about half an hour in. Um, just showing this book that I wrote with David Grinspoon about the mission to Pluto system. The book's called Chasing New Horizons. It's published in 2018. It's still in print. Uh, I call that book My 100 Lost Weekends, because it took 2 years of weekends to write it and polish it before we turned it in. And with that, I'll just say thanks again to Marav. And
Thanks, Alan. That was fantastic. We are going to open for questions, but before that, I'm just going to ask one little question. Yeah, but was fabulous. I just want to lean a little bit on one of the questions that you addressed, that we asked you, that was related with how to overcome new ideas, right? And we had this discussion with several people. in these webinars. And I encourage everybody to go back and listen to some of them because I am a big believer that amazing science is done at the edge when you're really pushing the envelope and you're asking questions that people didn't ask before, and you're going to get pushback. If you're too safe in your science, it's really hard to advance. And so you want to do that, you want to go those questions that are challenging. And so in terms of when you call it early adopters of ideas, I call it out of the box ideas or whatever, but those early adopters of ideas that will have a lot of skepticism from the community. I had my own box of tricks. Like I will call my sister, I will call my dad. They both were scientists, and I would just hear their voice, and was enough for me to say, okay, go back in the ring. I would just like there was no other way. I would just hear my dad, hi, just said bye. I just needed to hear him is the validation. So I wanted to hear from you a little bit on the box of tricks, not managing the politics of it, not the practical side, but your own self-doubt or your own box of tricks with yourself that steady you. Like I like, for example, to remind myself, I adore this so much that no matter what else people are going to say, I just remind myself how much I believe in this idea. I don't know.
Sure.
I just
That's
wanted you
that's a
to,
great
yeah,
topic. I've never really thought about it the way that you posed the question, so I'm just reacting to it.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I think, um,
And
you
I'm
know,
having my
you,
coffee. This is a coffee chat.
I think first of all, I have to be frank and say, um, if in baseball, if you bat, nobody bats 500 in
Mm-hmm,
baseball. If you bat 400, you are a star. In
mm-hmm,
science, it's nobody bats 1,000 either, except maybe Einstein.
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
most of us have to. Science is a tough career. We take defeats all the time. We get
Mm-hmm.
lots of critique from colleagues, from people who referee our papers, from rejections of proposals and things
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that. We have lots of ideas. Some of them turn out to be right. Some turn out to be wrong. Some take a second, third, fourth try. Same with proposals. Projects run into all kinds of problems. Even though you said let's not talk about politics, some of it's political, some
yeah,
of
but there
it's
is. Yeah.
technological, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, I would say that every person approaches this differently. In my case, um, uh, I think um, when I think it's important, I try to find a way to solve the problem, and I don't usually let go of it, um, even if it takes decades. And I wish things went faster a lot of the time, or they were easier. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a lesson, particularly for people thinking about a career in science or early in their career who have to oftentimes deal with something they didn't really expect. Maybe they were super at it and exemplary in high school and university. And then when they get out into the working world, they get rejections
Yeah,
of one sort or another. For example, with proposals that you put a lot of work into and they don't always turn
yeah,
out. In fact, they usually don't turn out. That's the thing. And it takes a lot of internal fortitude for all of us, myself included, to take that kind of critique and to keep going in the face of what can be withering criticism. But you have to believe in what you're doing and that it's important and that it's, something that's moving the boundary forward for everyone.
right, 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 right. Anyway, yeah, we can talk more about it outward. I see Tom is here. Hi, Tom. It's great. Seeing another push of boundaries. Anyway, I'm going to open the floor for questions. I think if you want, you unmute and ask a question. We also have in
It,
the chat questions.
yeah, there's a number of questions in the chat. Why don't we handle some of those first?
Okay. Let's see. Um, John Cooper, you had well, I'm scrolling down, I'm scrolling up, and John, you didn't had a question, right? It was more a comment.
He's asking about what led to to SwRI opening up a lab in Boulder.
No. I mean,
Oh,
Jan Bergman.
oh,
Bergman, do you
I
want to
have
unmute?
another question actually. But
Okay, so unmute, you can go. We can go on. Yeah. Jan, you can ask.
yes, so I have a question. We had some equipment on the International Space Station launched in 2013. And I've been trying to ask some astronauts and cosmonauts to like take pictures. You've been there, but I don't know who to ask.
Probably this, I don't know that this will be the right answer, but probably start with whoever your funding officer is at whatever agency
Yeah.
it is and see if they can put in a request.
The problem was that this was with Russia.
That's a tough one
So
for
yeah,
a number of reasons.
we are not allowed to talk with them.
Yeah.
But there
Well,
was a picture taken like in 2021 or 2023 of the equipment. But I would like to ask somebody at the station to go, if they're on like on a trip on an EVA, you just take a picture. But I know since 2013 that the schedule for astronauts are like on a 30-second level. So you can't just go and ask them to take a picture.
let me
Yeah.
make a out of the box suggestion. One of the things that's developed in the last few years has been what are called PAM missions to the ISS. These
Yes.
PAM missions involve the flight, so far they've all involved the flight of SpaceX Dragons that fly either astronauts for foreign sovereign nations or high net worth individuals who can buy a seat and who often do research. And
Right.
they're often looking for ideas for how they can contribute in their off time.
Okay.
And it may be that if you go through the commercial providers, NASA just announced the fifth and sixth PAM missions were just awarded last month and this week. The first one is led by Axiom, and
Yes.
one that was selected and announced yesterday is a new company called VAST, VAST.
I don't know.
You may be able to make some entrees through those companies and suggest a task for people who are flying on these PAM missions to take some pictures of your equipment. Either I can't tell if they should do it on approach that your equipment's outside or maybe when they're inside the vehicle, but they're often there for 2 weeks.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
guys, I'm
Thank
going
you
to
very
switch to another question that actually provoked follow-up questions, and it started, I think, from an early career. Caroline Hasselbacher, you can unmute and ask yourself, but I'm just going to read it. Congrats on many achievements. How do you manage your time and keep up efficiency to get things done, even when self-doubt creeps in and tries to sabotage? Caroline, did I capture it or something else?
Yes, thanks. Maybe Daniel should go and
And there
his
is
question.
also a Daniel Brand follow-up on that question asking, Daniel, again, you can unmute and also ask, but I'm just reading until you do it for question. Following up on Caroline question, how do you manage time and demands with family? What recommendations do you have for early career researchers who feel a lot of pursuit to do everything to become more established and secure, but not burned out and sacrifice their families in the process?
Yeah. Well, I would have to say several things in response to that. First of all, time management is a very important skill for us to develop as scientists because there's so many demands on our time. And for me, I've managed time, I would say, primarily through three things. One is I am an inveterate planner and maker of lists. I make a list every week. I make a list every day, and I cross things off the list. And if they don't get crossed off, I move them forward to the next day or the next week as appropriate. And I make lists at the beginning of the year for objectives for the year and so forth and so on. It's all about making lists. Secondly, none of you are going to like this, but I'm just lucky, I think, because I want to be productive in that I don't need as much sleep as most people. I like to get up super early in the morning and work for a few hours before meetings start, and putting extra hours in is a big part of it. And I will also say that I think I have less work-life balance than most people. I'm very dedicated to my work. And so maybe to an extreme, it's not healthy sometimes. But because I always grew up wanting to do one thing, it's a very inner core part of my self-worth. And so I don't mind putting the hours in because I think that that they're worth it. So I would say those three things would come top of my list, but each person has to develop their own techniques. I will say that I sent a couple of postdocs once long ago to a time management class, and they both liked it very much. So I would encourage, it sounds like something corny and not for scientists, but they both came back and said, that was really a day well spent. And I think I could tell very quickly within a matter of weeks that they were both becoming more productive and more focused and dropping less balls. And so, it's never taught in grad school. It's never taught in undergraduate classes. If you get it, it's probably through osmosis or a mentor. But there are courses, and they can be very helpful. I've never taken one, so I'm sorry to say I'm making a secondhand report, but that's a thought.
This is an interesting, both Caroline and Daniel asking. This is a topic we had in Shield. Each of us have their own strong thoughts related with that. So thanks, Alan, for it's a really interesting topic to revisit. And people with small kids, I started when my kid was 1 and running to daycare. There is all,
If
challenging how you do
you don't
that.
mind my telling the story.
Yeah.
Earlier in my career, I remember telling a colleague, and I said to her, I've got this terrible conflict every evening when I go home, that there's a bunch of things I want to do for work, but there are my kids, and they're going to bed pretty early, 7, 8 o'clock, or 9 o'clock when they got a little older, and I'm always stressed because it's a choice between two things that I love, but it's a terrible choice to have to make every evening, and she said, why don't you start getting up earlier? The kids are never awake at 5 a.m. Maybe that's the time for you and to do more work. When you come home, just pay attention to the family. And I did that. And and she predicted it completely correctly. She said, you will hate this at first, this getting up early thing. She says, but I bet you if you do it every day for a month, you'll learn to love it. And she was right. And that doesn't work for everybody, but it worked for me because then I could separate those two things that were both important so they could both win.
Okay. I have my own thoughts about it too, but I'm going to not talk about it. I want to make sure that we have enough time. Let me scroll down. If somebody else on this type of questions want to unmute and ask, that is the time now. You can write in the chat as well. Heather, I thought you had a question. You want to unmute, or do you have your?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wrote, how have you mastered the art of persuasion / inspiration needed to get your endeavors and missions funded?
That's a great question, Heather. I'm not sure I mastered it. Like I said, I'm blessed by a lot of successes, but the number of things that didn't work out is probably a lot longer list. And that's true for all of us, isn't it? Right? That, nobody wins 100% of their proposals, projects they want to do, or so forth and so on. So I just count the successes and try to offer to become engaged in as many things as possible. I never want to have to be in a position to propose to do things, whether they're through a formal proposal process or more informal, just like going to your boss or your mentor and saying, I want to do X when I really don't want to do X. I want to always be in a position to be very well aligned. So between my interests and my responsibilities. So I'm always enthusiastic about all of them. And of course, that can't be true about every task every day. It's rare to find an individual that loves writing final reports. I sure don't. But that's a small penalty to pay for all the good stuff that comes out of, leading a project or being a part of a project team. So I think that alignment is an important thing to talk about, and hopefully that answers your question a bit.
Great. We also have a question from, I skip a mistake here, from John Cooper. You want to unmute and ask?
Yes. Hi, Al.
Hi, John.
I may have missed something in the beginning, but how did the move to Boulder occur, and did you have a role in doing that for SwRI?
Yeah, that could be a long story, but I'm not going to make it one. I saw an opportunity for Southwest to be able to grow faster in space science because I thought recruiting talented people to live and work in Boulder was a way to help us expand faster than just being in one location in San Antonio. And that turned out to work. We had a lot of really talented people come to work for us, and very quickly. And so first, as I said, we were 2 people, and then 4, and then 8, and then 10, and then 20. And then, people went from saying, what is Southwest Research Institute, to saying you're the Microsoft of planetary science. And so I had to take that up through management chain, which I was at the bottom of in those days. And we were rejected, and not just rejected politely, but rejected pretty violently twice before we got a yes. But my boss supported me. And when we got up to Boulder in 1994, it just worked. It took a lot of hard work for a lot of reasons, but I'm very proud of the fact that it's become such an esteemed scientific organization, and that it's contributed so much back to the home base in San Antonio.
Well, indeed it has. Thank you very much.
That's great. Please, if you have questions, put in the chat. I'm scrolling down. There was another question. I think I passed. Right, John Williams. Do you want to unmute?
Hey, Alan.
Hi, John.
Quick question for you, and you touched on this briefly. What would you recommend for high school students that are interested in maybe a career in space exploration or science? Do you have a reading list or something that you could share that might be something that would help motivate them?
For those of you who don't know, John was the valedictorian in my high school class. He's not a space scientist.
Nice.
He's a very accomplished man. But John, I don't think I have a reading list that I've ever written down. I sure have a lot of books I like. But I would tell kids in high school to just follow their heart. Just do whatever turns you on the most in terms of a particular field. And in terms of space exploration, when I talk to schools, I like to tell kids that, we need all kinds of people in space exploration, not just scientists and engineers or people that are great in a machine shop, or on a bench with electronics. We need people that are great at business, and we need great people that are at the public affairs and public relations side. And we need people that are good at almost every profession on the earth applies to space exploration in some way. And I'm sure that in the future that space companies and space agencies will be hiring even cooks, to fly to the moon and fly to Mars and go on, because we'll need all those people, just like in Antarctica, that back you up, that aren't doing the frontline science, but that make it possible. And so, I think if you're a kid, whatever turns you on the most is what you want to do. And if you want to do it, well, almost whatever it is, it applies to space exploration in some way. You can find an angle, even if you're just like not good with numbers. I'm better as a writer, or I'm more interested in business and accounting. We need lots of those people, and every other profession too. So I think the most important thing to succeed through the gauntlet of education and early career is to not get frustrated, and to be agile, to make changes where you learn or you find obstacles to go around them. But to be excited about what you do is contagious and will really help your career. And it's by choosing what you're most excited about to go work on, it's much less a chore. You're much more likely to want to put the extra time in, and it'll be more a part of you to want to succeed than just because you're getting a paycheck or because you want to be employed. And I think that energy behind that excitement is very important to success.
I agree. Yeah.
Thank you.
I always check myself if I wake up and I'm like, dong, excited and thinking about, yeah, I'm on the right path. We have two more questions that I think we can take. One, Mark Kornbluth was asking about stepping into leadership. So Mark, can you unmute and ask? And then I'm going to go for Jason next. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I guess I didn't email the whole chat on that. But
It's okay.
yeah,
You text
yeah.
me, so I knew it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I have a question. So as an early career, there's kind of, the stage where you start to get proposals, you can go from co-I to PI. Obviously, a lot of your career has been defined by leadership. So I was just curious about like in your career, what was like the breakthrough moment for you where you really feel like your career kind of shifted to the path you're on now?
I don't think I can say there was a single breakthrough moment. I remember publishing my first author referee paper. That was a big deal. Winning my first proposal to be PI of something was a big deal to me. The first people that worked for me, as colleagues, as postdocs, was a big transformation. I had a lot of doubts about whether I could do a PhD program, having been an engineer and going into astrophysics. And succeeding at that was a big deal. So I'd say there were a lot of those moments, and no one of them was, they're all necessary, but none were sufficient alone. I think for all careers, it takes a lot of steps, and you have to succeed many times. Everybody knows you've done that, Mark. And sometimes we're unfair to ourselves, and we discount the magnitude of the things we succeed at. Because most careers in science can't be like Einstein, where a single paper results in a Nobel Prize, right? Mostly we're putting bricks in a wall and contributing one step at a time. And that's a long and laborious process, and it's full of, 2 steps forward and 1 or 2 steps backward before the next steps forward. So doing, I just say people should recognize all their victories and not look for some single giant home run that wins the whole game.
Good answer.
Folks, just before I ask, I will pass for one last question. There will be a questionnaire that our back people in Shield will send you for new speakers and new ideas for other big people for us to bring to Shield webinar. And it will be the recording on our website. Okay, let me
I also mentioned one other element to success is coffee.
Coffee.
Yes.
Yes. Going up in Brazil, it's fundamental that stop, coffee, enjoy life, and then you go back. Jason, you want to have Gartner, if I said correctly your last name. Do you want to unmute and ask the last question?
Sure, thanks. Hey, Ellen. Turns out you're really good at talking about yourself in addition to all the other things. It was a very great talk.
Hi, Jason.
My question is how you balance, and I realize this may have changed throughout your career, going, say, into like the really technical research, very down the weeds kind of thing, into the rabbit hole, versus kind of staying at the high level, thinking about, the leadership and big missions. Did you do that intentionally, or do you have any insights on that?
I don't think I did that intentionally, like in some calculated way. I just think it's been both parts of what I've spent time on over the years. And I enjoy the both kinds of games. By games I mean enterprises, really, but things that require you to think very broadly and very big picture. And I also like going down and deep. whether it's into data or an idea, some computer modeling, what have you. And there are different skills, and I think at different times I've been better at one or the other, and maybe not good at either sometimes. But it wasn't really by design so much as just the way things developed. And there are a lot of people who are better than me at both of those tasks by very great amounts. I just realized in your question that I probably should have answered one of Marav's questions by adding versatility, that I've been willing to be versatile. I talked something about the range of different things that I've worked on. But we often get these reversals. A funding proposal isn't accepted, or maybe a whole spate of them isn't accepted, or a project doesn't work out, or a rocket blows up with your payload, or a paper's rejected, or what have you. And being versatile and being able to pivot and go work on something where you can make progress, maybe while the idea that didn't work out percolates for a while. At least it's been important in my career. I found it useful.
That was a wonderful bow to finish this great conversation. Alan, was a total pleasure. This is feel like a beginning of a long conversation. I love it. Thank you so much, folks, for coming. I hope you will come for other webinars, and it's always very interesting to hear and be inspired by whoever we bring. So anyway, Alan, have a wonderful day, and thank you so much, folks.
Thanks for the invitation. Bye-bye.
Welcome.